A struggling single mom got into a Millionaire So's car by mistake. Then her life changed forever. The rain fell in relentless heavy, sheets turning the cracked pavements of West Glen View into shallow streams. Elise Carter pulled the hood of her threadbare jacket tighter, her arms cradling 8-month-old Laya against her chest. The baby's forehead burned hot through the thin fabric, her small body racked with feverish shivers. Elise bounced gently on her heels under the narrow awning of a shuttered launderette, trying to keep Laya calm. The doctor's clinic in the city center only accepted walk-ins in the morning. If they missed this window, the next appointment would be 2 weeks away, and Laya's rasping cough made it clear she did not have that kind of time. Elise glanced at her phone, the screen barely visible through the raindrops. The Uber she had ordered was just a minute away. "Almost there, sweetheart," she murmured, kissing the top of Laya's damp curls. A black SUV pulled up beside the curb, its license plate ending in 394, just as the app said. Without a second thought, Elise rushed forward and pulled open the rear door. "Thank you for stopping. My baby's very sick," she said, breathlessly, sliding into the seat and adjusting Laya on her lap. Her nappy bag tumbled down at her feet with a muffled thud. The interior of the SUV was pristine. Leather seats, no crumbs, no empty coffee cups, not even the slightest smell of fast food. It took her a moment to notice the man in the driver's seat sharply, dressed in a charcoal suit, his hands frozen on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry. Who are you, and why are you in my car?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Elise blinked, confusion dawning. "Wait, this isn't my Uber," she asked, her voice catching. "No," the man replied, turning slightly to look at her through the rearview mirror. His eyes were a striking pale blue, his expression unreadable. "My license plate ends in 931, not 384. Elise's heart sank. "Oh my God," she whispered, reaching for the door handle. "I am so sorry. I must have mixed up the cars. I'll get out right now," but before she could open the door, Laya let out a violent cough, her tiny body shaking against Elise's chest. Elise instinctively held her tighter, trying to soothe her with a soft hum, though panic pricked at the edge of her composure. The man in the front seat turned, fully now, watching the child struggle for breath. He exhaled slowly. "She's burning up," he said, more to himself than to her. Then, after a moment's pause, "I'll drive you." Elise looked up, stunned. "You don't have to. I mean, you don't even know me." "I don't," he said, shifting into gear. "But that baby doesn't have time for you to wait in the rain for another car. Where are you headed?" "Elentro Community Clinic," she said softly, still unsure whether this was some strange act of kindness or a terrible mistake. "Good," the man said simply. "That's not far." The SUV eased into the traffic, its windscreen wipers working double time. Elise settled back into the seat, still holding Laya close, the baby's cough subsiding into wheezy breaths. She glanced at the man's face again. He looked vaguely familiar, like someone she might have seen on the harbor. cover of a magazine or in the background of a news segment. "I'm Elise," she offered quietly, "and this is Laya." "Grant," the man replied, his eyes on the road. Something clicked. Grant Whitmore, CEO of the Whitmore Group, a name she remembered from a headline about some massive housing development deal last year. She stared at the back of his head, too surprised to say anything else. When they stopped at a red light, Grant adjusted the heat, turning it higher. "She needs to stay warm," he said. "And you're soaked through." Elise glanced down at her, jeans clinging to her legs. "Yes, it's rather unavoidable when you live 5 blocks from the nearest covered bus stop." They reached the clinic just 15 minutes later. Grant pulled into the car park and shifted the car into park. "Good luck," he said, his voice still. Cool but not unkind. "I hope she gets better." Elise looked at him, the rain glistening on the window. "You really didn't have to help us." "Thank you." He gave her a small nod. "Take care of her." As Elise stepped out into the drizzle, Laya, now softly asleep against her shoulder. She had no idea that getting into the wrong car on a rainy morning would turn out to be the most important decision of her life. The rain beat a steady rhythm against the windscreen, a quiet counterpoint to the silence inside the SUV. Elise sat tensely in the back seat, her arms wrapped around Laya, whose fevered head pressed weakly against her mother's chest. Grant glanced in the rearview mirror every so often, his hand steady on the wheel, but his expression remained unreadable. "I'm really sorry again," Elisa murmured. "I didn't mean to invade your car like that. I thought you were the Uber." Grant's voice was calm and low. "You mentioned your baby is sick." She nodded, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Yes, Laya's 8 months old. She's had this cough for days, but the fever started last night. I've been trying to get time off work, but both my jobs are short-staffed and—" She trailed off, sighing. "If we miss this appointment, they'll reschedule us for 2 weeks from now." "You work 2 jobs?" he asked, glancing at her again. "I'm a night cleaner at a law firm in the city center and a barista at a cafe near 16th and Pine." She shifted Leia gently, adjusting her blanket. "Rent is high and childcare isn't cheap. It's just me, so—" Grant was quiet for a moment, then said, "Where is her father?" "He left before she was born," Elise said, keeping her tone even. "Said he wasn't ready to be a parent. He was ready to disappear, though." Grant's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be," she replied, but her voice faltered. "It's not your problem." The silence returned, thickened by her words. But then Grant spoke again, his voice softer this time. "My sister lost her baby when he was 10 months old. A respiratory infection. They lived in a rural area, and the nearest hospital didn't have a ventilator available. By the time they got to the city, it was too late." Elise looked up, the quiet weight in his voice catching her off guard. "I'm so sorry," she said. "She never forgave herself," he continued, his eyes fixed on the road. "And I never forgave the system." They didn't speak for a few minutes. Laya stirred, her breathing labored. Elise rocked her gently, whispering, words of comfort. Grant turned the heater up another notch, angling the vents towards the back. When they reached the clinic, a squat brick building with peeling, paint, and a faded sign, Grant pulled up close to the entrance. Elise moved quickly, gathering her nappy bag and sliding out, careful not to jostle Leia. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting his through the open door. "Really?" Grant gave a small nod. "I hope she gets better soon." Inside the clinic, the wait was mercifully short. The doctor examined Leia with practiced hands, then confirmed it was a respiratory infection. She needs rest, fluids, and breathing treatments. "I'll prescribe antibiotics and a nebulizer." Elise nodded, relieved, until she reached the front desk and saw the total for the nebulizer rental. £60, she repeated, her voice cracking. "Is there any way I can pay for it?" Later, the receptionist shook her head gently. "Clinic policy requires payment up front." "I'm sorry." Elise stared at the number. Her bank account held less than £45. Her next payday wasn't for 4 days. Her throat tightened, her eyes stinging. She turned away, cradling Leia, closer, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mummy will figure something out." Behind her, the glass door opened. Grant stepped in, brushing rain from his coat. He didn't say a word. He walked to the desk, pulled out a sleek black card, and slid it towards the receptionist. "Cover the nebulizer and her medication," he said simply. "Sir, receptionist began. "Please, just do it," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Elise turned, stunned. You don't have to do that." "I know," Grant replied, meeting her eyes. "But I want to." She opened her mouth, then closed it, overwhelmed. Leia whimpered in her arms. "Thank you," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "You don't even know us." Grant looked at Leia. "I know enough." The rain had stopped by the time Elise stepped out of the clinic, the sky still gray but quiet. Leia slept soundly in her arms, her tiny chest rising and falling in a more regular rhythm than before. Elise clutched the nebulizer bag and prescription paper in her free hand. She expected the SUV to be gone, but when she turned, Grant was still there, standing by the passenger side of his car. "Are you sure you don't want me to call another car for you?" he asked. "I'll manage," Elise said gently. "You've already done far too much." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white business card. Just in case, she hesitated, then took it. "Grant Whitmore," she read, her eyes scanning the sleek gold print. "Whitmore Holdings." Only when she said it aloud did the name register fully in her mind. She'd seen it on city billboards and construction signs, heard it in news clips about urban housing projects. She looked up at him, stunned. "You're that Whitmore." He gave a small shrug, almost apologetic. "Most days." Elise shook her head in disbelief. "Why didn't you say something? Would it have changed anything?" he asked. "You needed help. That's all I saw." The next morning, Elise sat on the worn sofa in her flat, Leia playing beside her with a soft cloth book. The nebulizer hummed quietly nearby. Elise held Grant's card in her hand, reading the name again and again, still unable to believe the man who had driven her and paid for her daughter's treatment was one of the most powerful names in the Wuhan city. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Miss Carter," a woman's voice said politely. "This is Vanessa, Mr. Whitmore's assistant. He asked if you might have time to speak with him today. He's at the clinic. He said you might still be nearby." Elise blinked in surprise. "He's back at the clinic?" "Yes." "He said there's something he'd like to ask you about a new project he's working on." Curious and slightly anxious, Elise dressed Leia, packed the nappy bag, and walked the 6 blocks back to the clinic. When she arrived, Grant was standing near the check-in counter, talking with one of the nurses. He turned when he saw her, offering a soft smile. "You came." "I was curious," Elise said, "and a little confused." Grant gestured towards a small waiting area. "Can we sit for a minute?" She followed, settling into the cracked vinyl chair while Leia dozed in her sling. Grant leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wasn't planning to come back here today," he began, "but last night I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation." "About you?" "Me?" Elise asked, genuinely surprised. "I run a charitable foundation alongside Whitmore Holdings. We've been developing a new program focused on family housing and healthcare support, especially for single parents. But it's always been designed from the top down. What we need is perspective from someone who is actually living it." Elise stared at him. "You mean me?" "Yes," he said. "We're hosting a focus group next week. Real stories, real needs. I'd like you to be part of it. It's just a conversation. We provide dinner, childcare, and a stipend for your time." She blinked, processing his words. "Why, me? I'm no expert. I'm just trying to survive." "That's exactly why," Grant said, quietly. "Because you know what it's like to need help. Because you've survived, you know what kind of help actually makes a difference." Elise looked down at Leia, whose cheeks were no longer burning with fever. "What kind of stipend?" she asked, cautiously. £250 pounds for the session," Grant replied. 2 hours. "And if you can't get the evening off, we'll pay to cover your shift." Elise hesitated, biting her lip. "You don't even know me." Grant gave her a level look. "I know you were willing to walk through the rain with a sick child. That tells me a great deal." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elise nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." Grant smiled, a genuine smile for the first time since she'd met him. "Good. I think you'll help us more than you realize." The lift doors slid open with a soft chime revealing the glass-paneled hallway of Whitmore Holdings. Elise stepped out, smoothing the wrinkles in her second-hand blouse. She held Leia's nappy bag close, though today the baby was with a neighbor. She had followed her gut into the lift and up to the penthouse floor. For the first time in what felt like years, Elise was walking into something that wasn't about survival. It was about being heard. Vanessa greeted her warmly and led her to a conference room where 4 other women were already seated, chatting nervously. At the head of the table was Grant, reviewing some notes. He looked up as Elise entered, his expression softening. "Glad you could make it," he said. Elise offered a small smile and took a seat near the end of the table. Bottled water, pens, and notepads had been neatly arranged for everyone. A small sign read, "Community, Wellness and Housing Initiative, Focus Group." As Grant began speaking, explaining the project's goals and inviting each participant to share their stories, Elise found herself listening intently. One woman spoke about juggling, night shifts with no child care. Another talked about the constant fear of eviction. When it was Elise's turn, she kept it brief, describing raising Laya, alone, working 2 jobs, just trying to make ends meet. Grant nodded thoughtfully, taking notes. "We want to create solutions that actually work, not just ones that sound good on paper," he said. "And that starts with listening." After the session, Grant invited Elise to stay for a quick debrief. As the others filtered out, she lingered near the window, watching the late afternoon sun stretch shadows across the skyline. Grant poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. "You were quiet at first," he said, "but what you shared about struggling with rent, working back-to-back shifts, it was honest. It matters." Elise smiled faintly. "Most days, I don't even know what matters anymore." He studied her for a moment. "You have strength. Not everyone in your position would show up here, let alone speak up." Before Elise could respond, a knock sounded on the glass. Vanessa stepped in. Grant Blake just arrived for the board finance review. "He's waiting in the East Room." Grant nodded. "Thanks. I'll be there in 5. The name hit Elise like a wave of ice. "Blake?" She turned sharply, blood draining from her face. "Blake Morrison?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant looked at her, confused. "Yes, he's our CFO." "Why?" Elise's hands tightened around her cup. She stared into the coffee as if it held the answers. I didn't know he worked here." Grant's brow furrowed. "Is everything all right?" "No," Elise said, her voice strained. "He's Laya's father." Grant blinked, stunned into silence. "I met him when I was finishing my childcare certification," she continued, the words spilling out. "We were together for almost 3 years. When I found out I was pregnant, he told me I was on my own, said it wasn't his problem and that I should figure it out. He moved flats, changed his number, blocked me on everything." Grant stood there, quiet, processing. "You're sure it's him?" Elise nodded, her voice shaky. "I never told anyone." "What was the point? He made it perfectly clear what I meant to him." Grant turned away for a moment, gripping the edge of the gata table. "That's a lot to take in. I'm not here to start anything," Elise said quickly. "You've done more for me in 2 days than he ever did. I didn't even know he worked for you. I thought you should know." Grant looked at her again, his eyes steady and serious. "Thank you for telling me." He paused, then added, "You didn't deserve that." "Neither did Laya." Elise exhaled, some of the crushing weight loosening in her chest. It felt strange sharing this. Secret, but maybe, just maybe, she had finally told the right person. The following week brought rain, again, soft and constant, as if the sky itself was waiting. Elise sat in her living room, the gray light slanting across the floorboards. Laia was asleep against her chest, warm and gently breathing. The storm outside mirrored the weight she'd carried for nearly a vasta year, one that had settled deep inside her, but never truly gone. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Grant. Kenta, you come to Whitmore HQ at 10. Tomorrow, there's something you should be a part of. Elise stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay in this quiet bubble with her baby and forget about the man who'd once made her feel like nothing more than an afterthought. But the way Grant had phrased, and you should be a part of, it landed differently. It didn't sound like an obligation. It sounded like trust. It sounded like she mattered. At 10 a.m. sharp, she stood in the polished marble lobby of Whitmore, Holdings, her heart pounding under her coat. The ceiling soared above her, all glass and steel reflecting her nervous silhouette. She held her chin high anyway. Vanessa greeted her with a soft smile and led her not to the main conference room but to a private viewing room adjacent to it. They're just beginning, she said, opening a door to a space lined with smoked glass. The lights are dimmed slightly, giving you a clear view of the boardroom beyond. Inside, Blake Morrison sat at the long table, scrolling through a Dahasa tablet, sipping from a Whitmore-branded coffee cup, completely unaware he was being watched. Several board members murmured in low voices. Daniel from legal sat with a thick folder of documents, and at the front, Grant stood tall, composed in his navy suit. Elise sat slowly, hands folded in her lap. She hadn't seen Blake in nearly 2 years. Not since she told him she was pregnant. Not since he told her, without flinching, that it was not his problem. Her stomach turned. Grant opened the meeting with calm authority. He began presenting a timeline of financial anomalies, projects that had stalled, initiatives that vanished without a record. Housing developments, family, outreach programs, health, partnerships in underserved areas. Elise's fingers tightened around each other. The screen lit up with images, budgets once earmarked for the exact block of flats she'd lived in. She remembered it all too well. The weeks, the water ran brown, the sound of rats in the walls, the space heater she used during Laia's first winter because the central heating had failed. Blake leaned back, a smug smirk just visible on his face. With all due respect, Grant, budgeting for these projects is fluid. We reallocate funds where necessary. Grant clicked to another slide. His voice remained even. Funds were reallocated into a private account in the Caymans, registered under your brother's name. Shell companies connected to construction bids we never even received. That isn't budgeting, Blake. That's theft. Silence fell. Blake's jaw ticked slightly. That's a very serious accusation. Grant didn't blink. And I have very serious proof. Then he looked toward the tinted glass Elise felt her pulse spike. She wasn't ready. But maybe she didn't need to be. Maybe bravery wasn't about feeling ready. Maybe it was just choosing to walk in any way. There's one more perspective this board needs to hear, Grant said, his voice quieting. Someone directly affected by Blake's choices, he nodded at Vanessa. The door opened. Elise stepped in. The room went still. Her heels clicked softly against the tile as she walked forward. She wore the same navy blouse she'd worn to her interview at the nursery, modest, pressed, and suddenly too tight over her racing heart. She didn't look at Blake, not at first. She looked at Grant, who met her eyes and gave a small nod, steady, silent, grounding. She took a breath. "My name is Elisa Carter," she said, her voice clear. "I'm a single mother and a former tenant of the Grand Elm apartments before the ceilings began to cave in and the mold spread faster than I could scrub it away." Now she turned to Blake. He froze. "You were in charge of the funds for that property," she continued. "You knew what was happening. You knew I lived there. You knew I was pregnant with your child." "Elise, this isn't the place," Blake started, his voice shaking. "No," she interrupted, her own voice gaining strength. "This is exactly the place. You disappeared. You blocked my number. You had a solicitor send me a cease and desist letter. You left me with nothing but silence and a child you have never once asked about." A long pause stretched across the room. Blake's face had gone chalk white. Grant stepped in beside her. "Elise has provided a full statement, and we've confirmed the timeline with our records. Laya's name is listed in multiple documents Blake had access to. He knew, and he chose theft over accountability." Blake stood, suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I want a lawyer." "You'll need one," Daniel from legal said calmly. "Effective. Immediately, your employment is terminated." Security is waiting outside. Blake stared around the room as if searching for a single ally. There were none. He collected his things and left, without another word, his gaze fixed on the floor. As the door clicked shut, Elise's breath shook once, then settled. The rain outside had finally slowed to a stop. "Thank you," Grant said, turning to her. She shook her head, her voice quiet. "I didn't come for revenge." "I know," he replied softly. "You came so someone else wouldn't have, too." The weeks that followed moved with surprising momentum. With Blake officially removed and legal charges filed, Grant wasted no time redirecting his energy. His mission was clear: restore what had been broken, not just reputationally, but tangibly, physically, and humanely. The first target was reviving the long-abandoned community housing project near Elise's old block of flats. "I want to finish what should have been done right," Grant told her one afternoon, the two of them sitting across from each other in his office. The windows framed a skyline in motion, clouds passing, people walking, change unfolding. Plans were already being redrawn, budgets reapproved, emails flying. "But this time," he said, "we'll do more than just build homes. We'll build possibility, safety, roots. Elise nodded slowly. Leia, cradled against her chest, one hand curled protectively around the baby's bottle. Words escaped her. How could she begin to articulate what it meant to witness the world shifting around her, and because of her, gratitude felt too small, too tidy. Also, Grant added, almost as if it were an afterthought, though Elise knew him well enough now to recognize when he was being deliberate. We'll be opening a child care center on the ground floor of the complex. Elise looked up, surprised but smiling. That will be a blessing for the parents there. So many can't afford anything close to reliable care. Grant nodded, then leaned forward slightly. And I want you to run it. She blinked. Wait, me? You studied early childhood education. You worked with children for years before Leia. And I've seen the way you speak to people, staff, strangers, me. You know how to lead with empathy and clarity. Elise opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her heart was thudding in a way that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't confidence either. I haven't worked since Leia was born, she murmured. And even before that, I wasn't in charge. I was just an assistant teacher. I've never led a team, never built a program from scratch. I don't have the credentials for this, Grant. Grant's voice dropped, not firm but resolute. You have more than credentials. You have experience. You've lived what many of those parents are living right now. You've walked through the fire and come out carrying someone else in your arms. I don't want a CV. I want heart. I want someone who knows what dignity looks like when it's all you have left. Her throat tightened, and she looked away, blinking fast. I just don't want to fail. You won't, he said, gently, firmly, because this isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. And you've been doing that since the day I met you. She shook her head slightly, a tear slipping free. You keep giving me more than I know what to do with, Grant. Stood, walked around the desk, and crouched beside her. Carefully, without pressure, he reached for her hand. I'm not giving, he said. I'm choosing. I'm choosing you because you know what it means to keep going when there's no map, and because you see people not for their mess, but for their worth. Something in her broke then, only to reform, stronger than before. That moment wasn't about charity. It was about belief. And for the first time in a very long time, Elise started to believe in herself too. 2 years later, the sun streamed into the small garden behind the West Hill Community Complex. Laughter drifted up from a small group of children chasing bubbles across the grass. It was Leia's 3rd birthday. Elise stood by a small table laden with cake and sandwiches, watching her daughter, who now ran with a joyful, clumsy confidence. Grant was on the grass with the children, his suit jacket long, discarded, his sleeves rolled up. He was down on one knee, pretending to be a fearsome but very ticklish dragon. Leia shrieked with delight and launched herself at him, yelling, "Got you, Daddy!" He caught her in a hug, spinning her around as she giggled uncontrollably. Elise's heart felt so full it might burst. Later, as the other families began to head home, Grant came and stood beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked, quietly. "More than I ever thought possible," she whispered, leaning, her head against him. She looked at the small plaque she'd insisted on placing by the entrance to her thriving childcare center. "This place exists because someone believed we could still bloom." She looked from the plaque to Grant, then to their daughter, now fast asleep on his shoulder, her face sticky with chocolate cake. "Can you believe it all? Started with me getting into the wrong car on a rainy day," she mused. Grant smiled, tightening his embrace. "It was the right car, Elise. It just took us a while to get here." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the life they had, built not from blood but from choice and kindness, she knew she was finally truly home. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. We bring you more true to life, tales of quiet resilience, unexpected grace, and the power of being seen. Because sometimes the smallest gestures, like a car ride in the rain, can hold the greatest meaning. Click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us weekly for stories that remind us family is not always who you're born to. It's who you choose, and who chooses you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next soul-stirring story.